The Quake universe is full of horrors and chaos. Countless worlds and species had fallen to the might of the Strogg Empire as they became a part of their vast armies and workforce. Yet, when this horror came to Earth, we responded with something that they had not encountered before: resilience. The first contact with the Strogg was an iconic event that spanned years in human history. An event that showed us just how strong we were and how far we were willing to go to save our own kind. However, this war was just the start, an ignition for many wars and operations to come. What prompted this first war with the Strogg? What impact did it have on us as a civilization? And what exactly did it mean for our future? In this video, we explore what kicked off the larger Quake storyline in the first war with the Strogg. Way before we interacted with what we came to know as the Strogg, back in the 1990s, our kind attempted to understand and explore the universe around us. To achieve that, the best and brightest studied and then moved on to work in scientific research facilities, one of which was the top secret horrendous transport research complex. In this very remote facility, deep underground, the head scientist, Dr. Wendell Gilman, focused his work on teleportation and the biological adaptation of the human body. While the latter was fascinating and complex in its own right, it was his work into teleportation that became important to this story. Under his leadership, Gilman and his team discovered that they could generate earthquakes to disrupt the time continuum to power slipgate portals, a breakthrough that allowed the facility to explore other worlds and dimensions. During the exploration of one of these, Dr. Gilman made contact with the Strogg in some sense, and as a result, he and his team used Strogg science to improve the basic slipgates they had already developed. In doing so, the Slipgate complex was created, and more worlds through the Quake dimensions were explored as the Slipgates became more stable. While this was a considerable moment for Dr. Gilman and the future of technology for mankind, it also had a dramatic, unforeseen consequence. It alerted the Strogg of us and where we were. Now, the discovery and interaction with Dr. Gilman could be considered or interpreted as an instigation of conflict from their perspective. Still, as the Strogg never communicated their decisions to us, we will never know. Still, we had been placed on their radar. In essence, the Strogg were the dominant species of their world. Stroggos. They were a collection of cybernetically augmented biological creatures from the various worlds the Strogg had invaded. Each world offered them new technologies, resources, and, most importantly, biological matter to adapt through a process called Stroggification. Not only did this process transform their conquered species physically into the best soldiers they could be, but it also took control of their minds through the implantation of a chip. A chip connected directly to the Strogg hive mind controlled by the Nexus, a giant brain that orchestrated almost every Strogg unit on their invasions. Each invasion increased their forces, an army of flesh and metal under the control of the Nexus and the Strogg leader, the PATRON. The origin of the original Strogg species is unknown. However, there are several theories. Some believe they were once what remained of a race of artificially created super soldiers for an ancient, advanced civilization that had fallen. With no empathy and a thirst for war and domination, they took their natural instincts to the universe to dominate it. Others believe that they and their world of Stroggos was very similar to our human world. Their understanding of science and technology advanced immensely, and they began to rely on technology a little too much until they used it to advance their evolution by force, in which they became a combination of flesh and metal and eventually lost their empathy. The final theory is the most interesting, that this race, or the origins of their race, was created or transformed by the witch goddess of the Quake realms, a witch goddess who was destroyed shortly after Dr. Gilman perfected the Slipgate technology enhanced by Strogg science. If they had seen the witch goddess as their creator, they would have taken this pretty personally when a human killed her. On their goal to dominate and assimilate all biological life into their army, they navigated the universe in search of planets to assault. To accomplish this, they made use of space slipgates to traverse the vast distances of space in seconds. The only issue they had was putting these slipgates in place to be used. Their main goal was to capture and transform through Stroggification. The second was to use what remained of the flesh of the fallen to acquire Stroyant, a processed protein and nutrient-based solution that essentially kept the Strogg units running efficiently. This was made from the recycled corpses of the fallen, both from the worlds they had invaded and their fellow units. They had made contact with Earth through Dr. Wendell Gilman in the Earth year 1996. It would take some time to get there. While it has not been confirmed to be canon, it is likely that, with the knowledge of Earth's local space location, they sent out a small fleet with a slipgate to put it into position in preparation for an invasion once it arrived. Until this slipgate was in place and activated, they simply worked on the other worlds and systems around them they had access to. As humanity entered the mid-21st century, we suffered from increasing weather, natural disasters, terrorist attacks, and war. To combat these issues, the Global Defense Force was set up, a military that operated across multiple nations and transcended national borders. Under this global army, even historically unstable regions managed peace, and humanitarian aid was granted to those who needed it. This was the start of a new era for us. It was during this period that space exploration had taken off. Space facilities such as the Armstrong, the McCulloch, and the Magellan orbited Earth and Mars. Human colonies had been established on Mars, Olympus, and several other worlds. To navigate space safely, the Space Marine Corps was also established. In essence, the GDF defended Earth on the planet itself, and the SMC monitored the systems out in space we had discovered. Now, it is likely that in around the 2060s, the small Strogg fleet and their slipgate arrived in our solar system. However, they did not attack straight away. They had to get an idea of who and what their opponent was. Mars and Earth were home to biological life that they could use to create new Strogg and to process Stroyant. Despite how careful they may have been, Earth's civilization also had impressive technology and organizations, one of which was the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, dubbed SETI. Although some alien life had been found out in the stars, we wanted to find at least another Type 1 or Type 2 civilization on the Kardashev scale, one that not only used the energy from its star to thrive, but maybe even one like us, a multi-planetary civilization that had begun to master the resources of our solar system. Earth, Mars, and Olympus were only the beginning. Within SETI in 2065, their telescopic arrays detected an unknown non-terrestrial transmission from just outside the asteroid belt around our solar system. Shortly after this, the human colony of Mars was reported to have been abandoned, but there were plans to re-establish it. This was odd, and considering that a possible alien transmission had been detected, there were theories that whatever had happened on Mars was somehow connected to whatever they were. It was then claimed by officials that the fall of the Mars colony had nothing to do with the arrival of the mysterious aliens in the solar system. Yet, it is believed by many that this was just a cover-up by the national governments. Even now, the story of what happened on Mars is unknown. It had been an interesting few days for both humanity and the Strogg. We were, for the most part, completely unaware of what the intentions of this alien contact were, but we soon found out. When they were ready, the Strogg activated the slipgate, and from it, their army of hundreds of Strogg ships appeared in Earth's orbit in seconds. This action was observed by the personnel of the Moore Observatory in Reversion Island in Africa, but before they could alert anyone, it was already too late. As they had done many times before, the Strogg began. Dozens of their ships departed for Earth as the rest stayed in orbit. These scanned the planet and hacked into our communication systems. With this knowledge, they selected regions to set up headquarters to prepare for their ground assault on the population to secure biological matter for Stroggification and Stroyentification. This instant arrival and bombardment of humanity's most built-up regions with missiles and laser beams gave the Strogg the advantage of a surprise attack, and as our militaries attempted to pull together to defend against whatever this was, the Strogg got to work. Following the destruction of Paris, Peking, Reykjavik, and Tokyo, the whole world fell into a panic as Strogg armies of flesh and metal left their spacecrafts. The cyborgs swarmed the streets as they captured and killed anything that lived. Dead or alive, each human was a resource. For those captured, they were sent to Stroggos through portable slipgates that had been set up. As the strongest force on the planet, the GDF made use of their armies and technologies across the globe to fight back against these alien invaders. The orbital stations were turned into defensive stations, but these did not last for long. In just these first few days of the assault, countless of the population were either killed or taken to Stroggos. With each person taken to the Strogg homeworld, a new soldier was born to fight for them, under the direct control and orders of the Nexus, forced to fight against their own. Yet, when the Global Defense Force found its feet and recovered from the surprise attack, they began to use everything at their disposal to slow down their invaders. The issue was that this would just take time. As the months of war turned into years, the Strogg realized that this species was not as simple to conquer as they had thought. They were resilient and fought back, and the GDF was exactly what humanity needed. With everything they had, these armies were sent on missions to assault Strogg headquarters and learned as much about them as they could. Still, more headquarters were frequently built under the command of Strogg data brains. The most important of these was constructed in Antarctica, a Strogg Nexus tower that was to become the primary command and control center for all of the Strogg forces on Earth. This region was also very well guarded. On the battlefield, the GDF fought with Strogg units and took the weapons from their bodies. With these, GDF scientists explored how they worked and reverse engineered them to improve our technology and weaponry. And as each one was acquired by a human scientist and studied, we leveled the playing field. Strogg ships were also captured, and their designs were used to improve and create our own interstellar warships. In Norway, a remote GDF research station, the ARC, analyzed Strogg biotechnology through the use of a bioscanner. In Nevada in the United States, another team captured a Strogg slipgate and began to test it to understand just how the Strogg were able to jump such large distances. In New Jersey, the GDF discovered the arrival of a new data brain that had been deployed to oversee the construction of a new facility. The team asked that this data brain be captured for analysis by GDF High Command. All across the globe, humanity studied, fought, and became stronger thanks to Strogg science. On the side of the Strogg, their countless slipgates constructed on Earth allowed them to move across the planet rapidly. Their issue was that the GDF quickly discovered where they had set up and attempted to shut them down. In Yosemite Valley, California, USA, the Strogg even contaminated the water supply in order to transform the population into mindless zombies. As long as they were alive, it did not matter what state they were in. As soon as they were Stroggified, they were complete. They did not need their minds. All over the world, from Africa to Finland to New Zealand, the GDF came together to stall, assault, capture and study anything Strogg they could. It was also during this time that they discovered the true reason the Strogg had assaulted. The United Nations and general armies initially believed that the Strogg had invaded their world for the planet's natural resources such as minerals, metals, and water. But upon the discovery of a facility in Kings Canyon in the Northern Territory of Australia, amongst other Strogg regions and ships, the GDF were disgusted with what they found. The fallen human soldiers were harvested for their limbs for Strogg food, and those in working condition were turned into Strogg. This was never about the planet's resources. We were the resource. Even in their best efforts, the GDF struggled to conquer the invaders over these years. The human population fell drastically from constant bombardments and reinforcements, but Earth's armies did take out as many Strogg as they could. They pushed forward as they shut down makeshift Stroggification and Stroyant processing facilities and used the Strogg's weapons and technology against them. Towards the end of the war, there were two missions in particular that the GDF hoped would help in the battle. One was the hope to use a geothermal facility in the Bay of Plenty in New Zealand to create an atmospheric EMP that would drive the Strogg out of Earth's orbit. The second and more promising mission was to hack into the slipgates the GDF had already secured so that they could teleport into the Nexus Tower in Antarctica and take it down. The eventual fall of the Strogg Nexus in Antarctica, the Strogg's loss of access to their slipgates that they could no longer send through reinforcements, the reduction of warships in orbit, and the knowledge of Strogg combat tactics, their language, coding, weaponry, and even the location of the homeworld through the exploration of their slipgates gave humanity everything they needed to fight back and keep the Strogg down. The Strogg had conquered countless planets, but the tenacity of the human race was something they had never encountered before. In a weakened state, dwindling numbers with no chance of reinforcements, along with the Earth having been drained of its natural resources and human lives, the alien empire was driven from Earth and out of our solar system. This was the end of the First War, a war that had scarred Earth forever. Despite the removal of the Strogg from Earth, this did not feel like a victory. Our major cities had been destroyed. Paris, Peking, Tokyo, and even the Martian colonies had fallen. Millions of people had died or been transformed into Strogg. Everyone had lost someone in this chaotic encounter. What made this worse was that this moment of silence felt temporary. The Strogg had been forced away for now, and we had taken control of their slipgates, but there was always the chance they could return sometime. What remained of humanity was angry, and they wanted revenge in some way. The population was not the same defenseless species they had been before the Strogg arrival. They were smarter and had reverse-engineered advanced technology in order to rebuild and protect themselves and future generations from another onslaught. The Terran Coalition of Man was established, a unification of the human colonies across the solar system, similar to that of the GDF, which had united nations into a global army. In this case, the Terran Coalition of Man united planets. If they could somehow launch a counter-invasion on Stroggos, hundreds of light years away, before the Strogg could recover and send out a new army, Earth could be saved. But this assault on Stroggos is a story for another time. I absolutely love stories like this in video games. The thought that all over the world, the Global Defense Force did their best to understand and break down what the Strogg were, all while their cities crumbled around them and a huge chunk of the population fell, is overwhelming. All of this likely started because humanity, specifically Dr. Gilman, attempted to explore the universe and advance their technology. The Strogg are one of my favourite mysteries, and I think at this point, I would rather not know what their true origin is. It was also difficult to stay on track with the story of this video, as there are so many tangents I could have gone on about the Strogg, the Space Marine Corps, or Stroggification. I also could not find Quake Wars Enemy Territory online, so I had to buy it physically and a portable disk drive. For this video, the extra effort was worth it. There are so many iconic Quake moments in the series, and I am not sure what to cover next. It may be Operation Overlord, Operation Advantage, or maybe something completely random. That was everything I wanted to say. If you enjoyed this video, then I'd love you to subscribe to the channel. Like the video if you liked it, dislike it if you did not, and let me know in the comments what you thought below. Finally, I would like to thank my gold tier patrons and channel members: Jonas, Lewis, Queen Arby, Fluffy the Dragon, Ruben Mendoza, Oren X, Azu, Comfy, Yali Rodriguez, 501st Clone Boy, Drakey Phoenix, Average Sol, Just Timry, Imperial Embers, Jimsy, and Canufex. Which war do you think was portrayed better? The first contact with the Strogg or the 7-hour war in Half-Life? Did you play Quake Wars Enemy Territory? Did the Strogg do anything wrong? And what would you like me to cover next? Let me know in the comments below. Glory to the Combine. This is where our story ends. Check back soon for a new one.